Hello and welcome to IT Infrastructure and the Cloud, powering government agencies into the future. Brought to you by TD Synnex, ATX Defense, and Google Public Sector. I'm your host, George Jackson with GovExec TV. A resilient IT infrastructure is imperative to executing the critical missions of government agencies. Key to that infrastructure is cloud, offering a host of benefits from continuous delivery to systems integration. Cloud is an essential piece of the IT puzzle and a necessary solution designed to bridge the gap between multiple systems in a cost-effective way. I'll speak with a variety of leaders today in the public and private sectors about IT initiatives at their organizations. Let's kick things off with Brian Merrick. He's Deputy Director of Service Delivery Staff at the Department of Justice. Sir, good to see you again.
Great to see you again, too.
Also, Zach Walker, co-founder, ATX Defense. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So Brian, last time you were here, you were at Department of State. New gig for you. Yep. Interesting title. What is a Deputy Director of Service Delivery Staff?
So as you can imagine, DOJ is a very complex organization with a lot of moving parts. So in my role, really I primarily focus on modernization of our enterprise and some of our direct-to-consumer applications and cloud platforms, as well as our traditional networking and hosting environments and service desk requirements as well. So really, in terms of some of the big pieces, we're highly focused on building out our existing cloud platforms in that shared responsibility model, trying to modernize some of those efforts, and then also bringing it together with our zero trust architecture initiatives. So I'm also in that role leading our implementation across the agency for zero trust. So it's really an exciting time to be there and see all those parts come together.
I mean, you were in the midst of a 3-year plan. Cloud was a huge focus of your work at Department of State. What are you stepping into? Walk me through, I don't know, what the foundation looks like and what you're hoping to build out of it.
Well, in a similar circumstance, mission IT areas have, naturally coalesced around cloud for resiliency and real-time processing and scalability. And so coming into GOJ, we had a really decent footprint in terms of existing cloud platforms. And now we're trying to take it to the next step and really take those platforms and do sort of a t-shirt sized approach to some of our solutioning. So coming into it, traditionally we had quite a few applications that were tailored for specific customers, and at the end of the day we ended up with multiple disparate solutions really fulfilling similar business needs. So what we're looking to do now is really rationalize a lot of those solution sets within a business portfolio model on our existing platforms so that we can reduce our operations overhead and also make it a lot faster to adapt the products to new changes that customers need, so we can keep that in line with our other zero trust offerings, move rapidly towards a better data analytics capability, and definitely some of the integrations that we see coming down the pike in terms of future needs. So I think we're in a good firm footing. We're definitely got a solid foundation, and now we're just starting to move out in that shared model.
Ton to unpack there. Zach, I know our audience is waiting with bated breath, but before we get there, tell me a little bit about ATX Defense, how you kind of came into that position from a background in public service.
Absolutely, yeah. So ATX Defense is a management consultancy. We focus on the defense and national security sector, both public sector organizations as well as commercial organizations. So I'm a managing partner. My partner, Sean Kotowski, is the other managing partner. We actually met in the military. We're both in the Army, so I know you were. We served for a year in Iraq together, and there's really no better way to find out if you can work with someone in stressful environments than when you're being rocketed for a year, right? So we founded the company a few years ago, and what I do within ATX Defense is focus more on our external engagements and our partnerships. For example, our partnership with Google Cloud. Also with my background, so as you alluded to, I've been a reservist for about 21 years. I enlisted in the Army right after the 9/11 attacks. And so for me, just government service and my career have just been intertwined as I've grown up. And so with ATX Defense, it's a way for us to merge those things together to be able to serve both public and private sectors, work with emerging technology, and really just drive outcomes and results for our clients in a way that I found it sometimes is difficult to do from inside the government. And so it's been a chance to have a really fulfilling kind of a different approach to modernizing national security sector.
Of the spokes that come off of cloud computing, where are you finding, Zach, right now you're spending most of your time? What are the key pillars or tenets of the work that you're doing at ATX around data sharing and other initiatives?
Yeah, so it's been really interesting because we used to joke when I was at NSA that cloud is just kind of a fad and it's this new thing, but it's been around for a very long time, and the government is adopting it, and in parts, of course, it's an island approach. Some are adopting it very quickly, some are a little bit slower. What we're finding when we work with primarily federal customers is just that they understand it, they want to be able to leverage it, but there's just a variety of barriers in the way, whether it's acquisition, it's contracting. I mean, that's something we deal with all the time. And I dealt with when I was government and Defense Innovation Unit is just so many organizations have such a clear and compelling need, but for whatever reason, again, there's many different reasons why, just the acquisition challenges are there. But then for those that do make the leap and can work out the acquisition piece, there's a lot of concerns around compliance and security. It's something that, and we see it in the commercial sector as well, ensuring that whatever they do procure is going to meet all of the relevant standards, and certainly there's a lot of them, right, for a lot of good reasons. So those are the things that we've seen the most, I think, is just it's really simple barriers, just being able to get the technology to the customers that need it the most, and then being able to get it compliant and secure and to where everyone is comfortable with its use, because the stakes are so much higher in public sector when something goes wrong, of course.
Before we went on the air, Brian, you used a phrase, enhancing service delivery is a big part of Justice's IT strategic plan. As Zach mentions barriers, what are some of the key barriers to doing just that, to enhancing service delivery?
Yeah, so definitely there are a lot of challenges in modernization and really adopting cloud and some of those other emerging technologies. So certainly, just like Zach was discussing, procurement is an ongoing challenge. I think one of the other challenges too is really making sure that in terms of our customers, they're highly informed about the way cloud actually works, because it does physically work differently, mechanically. The security controls are different, the procurement processes are different, the licensing models are different. And so what I've seen over the last few years, and definitely at Justice as well, is that there's sort of been a shift towards making business decisions are really in the forefront of making those technology decisions. So really having a tight integration with procurement organization is critical, and understanding what that license model looks like, especially when you start talking about SaaS type implementations. The licensing model can be incredibly expensive, but it also brings you great benefits. So really understanding the ins and outs of that is critical, and having that talented team of professionals, not just on the technical side, understanding the platform and the applications and the data layer, but also the security side, because security has to work differently, procurement side, and the budget side too. So we have to make sure that we've got a constant stream of funding available. You have to keep funding it, or you're going to lose your data. So that's one of those things that I think has been a challenge, getting all of those enablers lined up, and we're definitely moving in that direction at Justice. And I see that sort of ubiquitously as a general government challenge.
Zach, you mentioned SaaS, software as a service. How does that tie to a shared responsibility model for security? You mentioned security earlier in the program. How does shared responsibility tie in here?
Yeah, absolutely. So generally, the shared responsibility model is this idea is that security duties are split, some with the cloud service provider and some with the user. And of course, in industry, that's very important because it allows for distributing the risk. It's much easier to manage risk if you know that you're responsible for certain things. For example, if I use Google Workspace, I don't have to worry about patching a server if a zero-day vulnerability comes out, right? That's something that Google takes care of. Whereas on the other hand, if I'm using infrastructure as a service, maybe I do need to worry about that if I'm running my own server and I have to worry. So really understanding exactly kind of in that matrix who has responsibility for what. It's very powerful. I mean, certainly it can be risky if it's not done the right way, but it's great in the public sector because you get all the same benefits as you get obviously from the commercial sector, but then it should set the next level of importance for public sector. So for example, the data, right? The data that the public sector is going to have, extremely sensitive data, right? Department of Justice, I can only imagine what they have on me, and hopefully it doesn't get out. They have important data, right? Social security numbers, confidential information. There's, as I mentioned before, compliance. I'm not a compliance guy, but I find myself talking compliance a lot now because it is just such an important thing in government and also
It's
for
fun
companies.
to talk about too.
It's so much fun to talk about compliance. It really is. As a kid growing up, I just thought maybe one day I could talk about compliance on a federal show. Which
Here we go.
Here we are. Dreams do come true. But compliance, again, whether you're the public sector and you have to deal with the federal regulations, or even a company, right? Companies that want to do business with the Department of Defense, right? They have to meet this thing called Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. It is 110 different things, 320 objectives that they have to meet, which, again, a dream for someone like me, just who loves compliance so much. But a small business doesn't have time or the ability to do that. And so having a shared responsibility model, they know that if they go with a cloud service provider, that maybe 85 of those controls are met by the cloud providers. They don't even have to worry about them. But then the ones that they do have to worry about, they know they can focus on. So that's another reason it's great. Compliance, and then of course cost, finally, whether it's the public sector, which again, budget constrained. I know we mentioned acquisition challenges. It's very difficult to kind of maintain that full portfolio of cloud services as an organization. There's been some really good examples of where it's worked, but in general, it allows public sector organizations to get what they need without having to worry about kind of maintaining that full life cycle. And again, also for small businesses, it's wonderful because they can get just what they need, right? I can pay $30 a month for a Google Workspace license instead of having to hire an IT staff and setting up servers and all of that. So it's really powerful model. It's really beneficial.
Yeah, if I could just jump in on that shared responsibility model. In our respect, we found that so successful that we've extended it to operations, not just our security. And the beauty in that is that we can take a small platform team for each cloud platform and be able to build that deep core bench of expertise, create a shared common control environment where our mission IT providers can inherit those controls. We can do the provisioning and plug it into all of our zero trust tools, our identity solution, our monitoring solution, and abstract away a lot of that infrastructure time and cost and have enterprise license agreements so they can get directly onto the environment quickly. And then that way the mission IT folks can really focus their resources, their time, their energy on the business delivery, their relationship with their customers, with the mission. They own their data, they own their application, but now they don't have to worry about the nuts and bolts of getting set up in the cloud. And we found that is just such a great way to speed adoption. And it really creates also that shared sense of goal setting and achievement between the enterprise and the mission areas, because you have a shared interest in the outcome. And especially with cloud, I think it's so difficult to achieve those outcomes without truly understanding the end state goals, how the data is going to be used, what user behavior impacts there are in the environment. So it's just absolutely critical to have that tie-in. So I definitely want to resonate that is sort of the secret sauce, if you will, of how to speed adoption in any large organization that I've seen.
Zach, as he mentions end state goals, and I don't have to tell you this, but there is a huge focus in government right now on artificial intelligence, generative AI in particular, emerging technology. Like, walk us through where that fits in the shared responsibility model, or maybe just the evolution of everything that we're talking about here today.
You mentioned AI, so I need to take a sip of water for this one. I appreciate the question, and emerging technology and certainly artificial intelligence is changing. I don't want to say disrupting. I almost said it, but it's just changing the way that we operate. And even what we've seen in the last few months is just remarkable. If you mention the language learning models, large language models, and everything else, and I think public sector generally is a bit of a laggard just for all the reasons of compliance and acquisition. But then when it does hit, there's a huge impact. And I think that what we're about to see happen in public sector is unlike any transformation that we've seen in the public sector in possibly in history, since we went to this kind of a normal GS scale service in the industrialization area or in World War II. What we've seen in government and public sector, it's just the initial trickles, right? So for example, New York has implemented, and this is things through Google, contact center artificial intelligence. And so instead of having a huge fleet of people who can answer questions, you implement just very basic level AI, because you get the same questions over and over again. and using smart bots to answer those questions, right? And they've seen great savings. I think it's Wisconsin has implemented it into unemployment filings. And that's another great example of when to use artificial intelligence, when you have, again, the kind of the same structured data, the same process. And my understanding is implementing AI there, the state was able to clear its unemployment backlog. I was reading up on this last night, and I remembered back in my my Pentagon days in the Air Force, we had something called this future operating concept. It came out, it was almost 10 years ago. And I'm glad you're sitting down for this, but it was a DoD strategy document, and it did not mention artificial intelligence at all. Can you imagine a world now where AI is not even mentioned in any document at all? It's crazy. So the future operating concept, it didn't mention AI at all, but it mentioned this idea of operational agility. That was the big thing, is being able to have multiple options and pick one quickly. And it also mentioned superior decision speed. Again, the same idea is that's data informed and that you have a multitude of options and you can pick it quickly. And I think we're seeing now, I mean, that's really what the promise of artificial intelligence gives us. We have the ability now to, whether it's generating solutions through generative AI or simply just getting inferences from information that we already have, right? One good example of that is a project I worked in, Defense Innovation Unit, instrumenting Army vehicles to kind of sense and look for aberrations and abnormalities, and then use smart algorithms to say, well, there's something wrong here, we don't know what it is, but it could be a sign of a problem, right? Very different than the language models.
Yeah.
But being able to use that in order to get these insights, I think what we'll see moving forward in public sector is just a dramatic increase in productivity. Because that was always the promise with these future operating concepts. It's the idea that technology and humans can pair and work together and achieve more than either could independently. And so, yeah, there's a lot of talk about AI taking over the world or getting rid of jobs. And again, that there will be some of that, right? Like at some point, all the people that clean manure for horses, like they lost their job, right? But they found a different job, and hopefully they got a better job. And I think that's what we'll see with artificial intelligence impacting the workforce. And then in public sector, just freeing up people to do something that's less tedious, I think will also help with retention, job satisfaction. I think it's overall a very good thing for public sector, and I'm very excited to see where this ends up going.
And when you're cleaning manure, I mean, up is the only way that you can go. From there, I mean, Brian, this is fascinating, and I would love to stay on artificial intelligence, but after this segment here, we have a whole second half of the program, and before we get there, I want to talk about one thing that you're keenly focused on right now, and that's EDR and identity solutions. It fits into this IT infrastructure in the cloud landscape. Tell me how.
Sure. So as you can imagine, this has been a long-term journey for us and many organizations achieving zero trust. It really is a mindset, starts with that. But as we've moved through that process over time, we've got a really solid plan in place. And at this point, our architecture that we're using from a tooling standpoint to assist us in achieving some of those mindset goals is basically a combination of a very solid EDR technology, in addition to identity, our ICAM solution, and a trusted cloud broker. So between those three main tools, we are able to, one, identify, who our users are, and make sure that we understand where they're going. That cloud broker helps us, so we can see this is the location you're going, where our data is. And then with the EDR solution, we can bring in a lot of that threat analysis and basically use that to build out solid business rules. And so bringing each of those tools together has made it more powerful than any one of those tools alone. So now we have data that is very rich, that is giving us a lot of good information into our users' behavior in relation to potential threats that are out there and the mission needs that we have. So at this point, we've just about completed the rollout of our EDR solution, which has been great partnership with CISA and all the components in the agency. At this point now, we've come out of the pilot stages of the other tools, because we really had to figure out the lessons learned, and hate to harp on it, but once again, that shared model really helped. Because what we found was, when you talk about rolling out a single cloud-based identity solution, it's a lot of connections, a lot of users that are impacted. So by maintaining those relationships, keeping them intact between the mission IT providers and their direct users and consumers, we've been able to speed that adoption. And so at our level, we're saying, hey, you can keep doing the same role that you're doing. You just need to do it in this architecture so that we can maintain consistent security and governance over the overall process. And that's really showing a lot of fruitful promise as we're moving through that. We've got over 60 applications in that environment integrated already. And later this year, we'll be working towards integrating our major collaboration platform for the whole agency with all of these tools. So definitely a lot of excitement in the space. We're seeing just the benefits of especially our cloud broker being able to reach our cloud environment securely, rapidly, consistently. It's also helping us as we authenticate between different environments. As you can imagine, a franchised IT environment, there's just a lot of complexity as we move through that. So definitely very excited about that. I think we're going to continue to have some great knowledge as we bring these pieces together and improve our security posture across the enterprise.
Brian Merrick, great to see you again, sir.
Thank you so much for having me on. Really appreciated the time.
Zach Walker, a lot of fun. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, you've just heard from experts from the Department of Justice and ATX Defense. We have covered a ton of ground: procurement, shared responsibility model, artificial intelligence, and more. Up next, a pair of technology leaders from the Department of Transportation and a partner engineer from Google Public Sector. You're watching IT Infrastructure and the Cloud, powering government agencies into the future on GovExec TV. I'll be right back. Welcome back to IT Infrastructure and the Cloud, powering government agencies into the future. Brought to you by TD Synnex, ATX Defense, and Google Public Sector. I'm George Jackson with GovExec TV. Now, let's talk about cloud and cybersecurity case studies with Jack Albright, Deputy CIO at the Department of Transportation. Jack, welcome. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
His colleague here at the table, Tom Littleton, Associate CIO at DOT. Welcome.
Thank you, George.
And last but not least, Matt Ashton, Partner Engineer for Google Public Sector. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, George. Happy to be here.
So Jack, kick us off. What are you cooking? You got a relatively new Chief Information Officer, a new set of key priorities that you're focusing on. Walk us through at a high level, sir.
Yeah, so George, thank you. So for us, it's with our new CIO has been here for a little less than 2 years, came into the organization and realized that we really needed to focus on cybersecurity. So positioned the agency and really basically solicited and received leadership support from the top of the agency to make cybersecurity the #1 priority for the agency. So we joke a lot talking about basically it's cyber, 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 and even more cyber. And if I didn't mention, it's cyber. The second piece of it is we're looking at resourcing. So we have a large vacancy rate, and it's hard to basically attract the talent that we need from a cybersecurity perspective. And when we do get the talent, they leave relatively quickly. So we're competing across government for the same cybersecurity talent, and there's a big shortage in the cybersecurity talent and the ways that we get to that talent. So that's another area. The other area that we have that's cooking is we're looking at really reinvesting into the skill sets of the people that we already have on site. So reinvesting in the existing staff to retool them, reskill them, so that they're, one, modern skill sets, two, making them want to continue to stay and retain those staff at the department. And then the last piece is we're really looking at large-scale modernization strategies to take a lot of the deprecated technology, the legacy tool sets, leverage cloud-related capabilities, and really kind of transformation and common platforms and so forth to reduce redundancies, to reduce the threat landscape and so forth, so that way we're better equipped to be able to protect and defend the Department of Transportation.
It's an ambitious set of initiatives, Tom. Where do you plug in there?
Sure. So up until about 6 months ago, I was at the Federal Aviation Administration.
And then the department decided to devote more resources to cybersecurity in the transportation sector. We have a mandate to work with our co-sector risk management agencies, TSA and the U.S. Coast Guard. And so I moved over to the CIO's office, and I am literally building a new wedge of government from scratch dedicated to that sector cyber coordination.
Matt, that title, Partner Engineer for Google Public Sector, tell me about it and what goes into your day-to-day work over there.
Sure. So a partner engineer is pretty much an evangelist of Google's cloud and AI technology. So, as Jack had mentioned, skill shortage and upskilling being major priorities that you all have to address. As a partner engineer, I actually go out in the field and work with different customers and resellers and partners to train them up on cloud and AI, get them certified, right? Get them in a better position. So if they're actually in an operational role right now, they're better at that, or they're more in tune with the environment. And if they're not, then they get more awareness, and maybe they can, contribute to a bigger pool of applicants who are ready to be hired and contribute to the Department of Transportation, for example.
And those training sessions are legit. It sounds like they are pretty significant, difficult, take a lot of work to put into them. We were talking a bit before we kind of went on the air. Tom, you've been focusing a lot of that attention on the grants management process. Walk me through from start to finish what that looks like. What was it before you started cooking on this, and what do you hope it's going to be one day?
Sure. Thank you for that. So, when you look at the transportation sector, we have several partners that we work with to ensure security. We have the Transportation Security Administration, TSA, and U.S. Coast Guard, and between the three of us, we work and partner together to advance the state of all kinds of safety and security. And in the Department of Transportation, our number one mission is safety. And as the Secretary so eloquently phrases it, we can no longer separate cybersecurity from safety. So to that end, we look at what things that we can do using our unique authorities to advance the state of cybersecurity. TSA and Coast Guard have some very explicit regulatory authorities that allow them to act directly on cybersecurity. But after 9/11, most of the security functions were bifurcated away from the Department of Transportation over to DHS. So the one thing that we do have, though, is we have a lot of grant programs. And the administration did a fantastic job with the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and some others of giving the department a lot of good money to be able to recapitalize and advance the state of transportation in the United States, our infrastructure. So when you look at that, we have something on the order of like $1 trillion in grant programs that we're looking at. And probably 70–80% of that fall under the category of what are called entitlement or formula grants, and Congress sets the conditions of those that we really can't change that. But we can certainly, as we hand out those grants, encourage folks to use that opportunity to advance cybersecurity. But the other 20 or 30% of that $1 trillion, and that's a lot of cabbage, that is in the form of what are called competitive or discretionary grants. And we have the ability to mold the conditions of accepting that money. So just like we put in requirements for you to abide by the Americans with Disabilities Act or the Buy America requirements, we put in some cybersecurity requirements now too. And we're, like I said, building a whole new wedge of government dedicated to being able to work with TSA, with the Coast Guard, with industry and the other government agencies to make sure that we do this without creating any undue burdens, but also making sure that we help people to realize that cybersecurity is key to safety now.
Was it largely a paper-based process before, or has it been entirely digital for a long time? And maybe as a small follow-up there, Tom, talk a little bit about the end state, because either way, $1 trillion worth of spending and all of those applications, you're talking about a ton of data at the end of the day. Like, what types of insights does DOT, what type of insights can government more broadly learn from the type of work that you're doing there?
In the past, none of the grant programs are particularly new. That's one of the major things that government does, right, is that we take money and we find ways to make the lives of Americans better using that money. So really, it's just adding this facet to it to make sure that when you It takes some money to expand a road system or to maybe refurbish or build a new airport terminal, that you take cybersecurity into consideration just like you do with the ADA or the Buy America or things like that. It becomes a condition. I will tell you that the one thing is really probably the biggest set of challenges for us as we do this is recognizing that cybersecurity is not a one-size-fits-all application, especially when you look at the enormous scope and scale of the transportation industry. You know, there's tens of thousands of transportation entities, and on one end of that scale you have large organizations that have you know, long established IT and cybersecurity programs. They have expertise and they have resources to be able to up their game based on the threat. But you don't have to go too far down in the other direction before you start getting into those medium and small size transportation organizations that would like to do cybersecurity, would like to do better than what they do, but they don't have that expertise and they don't have those resources. So really our biggest challenge in this whole thing and what we can get out of this is a better understanding of how we can advance cyber maturity across the entire sector without placing an undue burden or scaring people away from coming in for these grants. You know, it's a priority of the administration to make sure that first-time grantees, small entities, tribal, territorial entities come in for grant money. And a lot of those folks have never come in for money before, and it would only scare them away if we turned around and levied some large cybersecurity requirement. So we look at each individual project that we're going to give the grant money to. We determine what level of cyber risk is present. We look at the maturity and capabilities of the grantee. And then we look to do something to, like I said, advance the state of cybersecurity. And I would tell you kind of as a baseline, you know, the cybersecurity doesn't have to be scary or big. You know, we encourage people to designate a cybersecurity point of contact, to develop a cyber reporting plan in the event that you do have a cyber incident, have a cyber incident response plan, and then we also ask them to conduct a cybersecurity self-assessment as a condition of taking the money, and that gives them a little bit of ability to understand where they are on the maturity scale, where their weaknesses and strengths are, and that kind of information is really valuable. You asked about what the data does. You know, data derived from a self-assessment allows you to be able to understand where you prioritize the resources that you do have, the policy decisions that you need to make, the things that you're doing well, and the things that you can do better at.
Seems ripe for opportunity, Matt, at areas like reducing overhead. I mean, in the first part of our program, we talked about artificial intelligence to a degree. It's also part of your portfolio.
Absolutely.
Tie those two elements together for me, grants management, artificial intelligence.
Sure, and just to piggyback off what Tom said, I fully agree, security should be foundational to any operation. And there's been this belief for a long time, for decades, that security, there's a trade-off with security and user experience or being able to run fast. And with, you know, the advent of cloud and AI technologies, you're able to actually have both coexist without a major trade-off between the two. So getting rid of a lot of operational overhead with document processing, you combine that with the pandemic and people working more remote, that becomes a very tedious process. You begin to accumulate a lot more technical debt. So that's where a great opportunity to, you know, leverage technologies like AI that can process documents for you, identify the different types of grants using AI to help, you know, free up your workforce from doing, you know, gear 1 and 2 work, the more repeatable stuff, to, you know, getting into those faster gears 3, 4, 5, et cetera, and, you know, doing the upskilling so that they can contribute a lot more from the human side. The whole point is not to replace humans, but to supplement them and free them up so they can do the work that they really want to do and that they're excited about.
As you focus, Jack, on cyber, and cyber, where does the cloud come in there? What is sort of the department's approach to cloud computing right now?
So government basically has cloud-first strategies essentially in place. So and also buy versus build initiatives as well. So when we look at cloud, we look at it. So there's a little bit of and we may be, you know, the minority here, but what we look at cloud is cloud's just an extension of your on-premise related kind of capabilities. So from a secure by design principle, is where we're talking a little bit about with the grants and with AI and things of that nature, that it's you have to apply the same rules that you have for on-premise that you do in the cloud. The difference is this is not you don't own the infrastructure essentially in the cloud. So as we're looking at things from a cloud computing perspective, it comes down to governance, obviously. It comes down to how we're how we're applying the guardrails, basically the safety guides for those systems and services that are there. If we're leveraging software as a service, it's a whole different basically layer of security related controls and principles versus platform as a service versus infrastructure as a service. Because what we found is folks that leverage a lot of, they go into the cloud, they say, hey, it's FedRAMP authorized, it's secure, we don't have to worry about this. But they're leveraging it for infrastructure as a service. And if you're leveraging it for infrastructure as a service, you still have to do everything. You still have to patch it. You still have to basically maintain it. You just have to secure the data. You still have to basically make sure that your authentication controls, multi-factor authentication and so forth, all the different security controls, you have to make sure are in place because those aren't being provided. They're available to you from a FedRAMP perspective, but because you're leveraging that cloud service in not the full capability of the cloud, meaning software as a service, where the vendor, whether it's Google, whether it's Microsoft, whether who it is actually maintaining the application, and you're just basically a user of that application. So we look at it more holistically from a cloud standpoint. So what we've done at DOT is we've standardized and centralized the cloud platforms. So the Office of the Chief Information Officer owns the cloud platforms, we provision the cloud platforms, and we make sure that we basically have the safety guardrails in place so when people are spinning up virtual machines or other related services, they're getting the DOT STIG compliant virtual machines and so forth with the security controls already in place. But what we do have kind of from a challenge perspective there is when we're looking at things, again, it gets back to the resourcing piece of it. There's so much work to do, and so from a cyber perspective, and I think we've all seen this, there has been a significant uptick in the amount of cyber activity from an adversarial perspective over the last couple of years. And so when we're talking nation-state related activity and so forth, that what we find is that one, from a resourcing perspective, we need more resources. And we're hiring. So if anybody wants to come join the Department of Transportation, look us up on our website. There's a full listing of positions that we have available there. But the second piece there is this isn't a novel concept that I'm going to say. It's been talked about for eons, and that is basic cyber hygiene. That you have to do basic cyber hygiene because it's the nature and sophistication of the attacks are getting more advanced. But if we make it easy for them to come through the front door, why do they have to worry about basically the sophisticated attack when they can get straight through the front door? And from a cloud perspective, where it gets a little more daunting is if your cloud is connected to your Active Directory, the brains of your network essentially, and if the cloud services get compromised because you didn't do due diligence, they have an immediate backdoor and can spread laterally to your internal network, which could be catastrophic.
Matt, every chief information officer that I speak to has a nuanced approach to cloud computing. I mean, it's clear that everybody has a different agency-oriented mission, so that makes sense to me. But another layer of maybe complexity is managing structured versus unstructured data. And you have this view all across public sector. You work with the agency who has a lot of on-prem. You work with the agency who is all in the cloud. And my question is, are there best practices for approaching how to manage that unstructured versus structured data? Are there commonalities across all of those very unique agencies or organizations all across the public sector?
For sure. So there's commonalities definitely in terms of unstructured data versus structured data. Structured data being more so databases, SQL, et cetera. Unstructured being more songs, emails, PDFs, different files that you can't really extract. Historically, you were not able to extract a lot of information from. So now, in this new era, you can extract insights from both. And to answer your question out the gate with the structured data with SQL, we've been managing SQL databases on-prem forever, right? And to your point, Jack, one of the benefits of the cloud is that manageability, taking away a lot of that patching, updating, so on and so forth, which is also a big arena for error as well. Misconfig, so on and so forth. So cloud, platforms, hyperscaler technologies have gotten better at providing fully baked solutions in addition to the make your own pizza kind of options, so that it makes it easier for government agencies to manage their unstructured data. Now with semi-structured, such as JSON, and unstructured data like the different types of file formats that I mentioned before, once again, that's where AI really comes in handy. Once again, you talk about somebody doing a grant program and putting in a grant document or whatever, or application. The AI is able to parse through that PDF or that scanned document and give you the key value pairs of all the different inputs. So now you're able to get structured data and semi-structured data from the unstructured data, which gives you way more insights, way more stuff to work with, basically, for a security perspective, for user experience improvement, et cetera.
As you manage the movement of that data, you face cybersecurity challenges internal to organizations. You face cybersecurity challenges, sharing data with external organizations. Walk our audience through some of those challenges, Jack. What do you have to deal with there?
So I think I'm gonna go back a little bit to start the answer, and that is looking at the executive order, the strengthening cybersecurity across government. Zero trust, as an example, is a big component of that. And so as we're looking at kind of internal and external challenges, to me, that's one of the big challenges. Who do we trust? Who do we not trust? How do we set those parameters up? So I think the partnership and working with not only the public sector, but the private sector, and kind of working through who's doing it good, and how can we leverage who's doing it good as a best practice and work to apply that across government. Because what we tend to do in government is we tend to basically do it 11 to 15 to 22 different ways, and so everybody's solving the problem differently. And I would like to see us come together and work together to basically solve it once, and then basically cookie cutter that across the board. Granted, every cabinet level agency and all the federal agencies have different missions. They're all unique. There's no question about it. But from an approach to cyber secure by design principles and things of that nature, it doesn't mean that we have to be different in the way that our methodologies and our approaches. And if somebody solves a problem, let's share how that problem was solved, whether it's through cloud-related services, whether it's through other vendor partners and things of that nature. Because as we're looking at things on how we share data, obviously there's open data platforms and things of that nature. But as we're looking at how do we secure the services and the information that's going back and forth, so we minimize, number one, we're not disclosing any type of sensitive PII-related information. One, two, we're not setting ourselves up for a breach or a compromise. But how do we work together to basically solve the problems of as we're working to implement the executive order? Because again, back to what I said, that the nature and sophistication of the cyber attacks are increasing significantly. All agencies, not only the federal government, but state, local, private sector, are all being hit hard with advanced cyber attacks and so forth, and how I think we just need to work together better and more in a more collaborative nature to solve some of these complex problems.
A phrase, Matt, that hasn't come up yet in our conversation, but I think is really relevant based off of what Jack said, is zero trust.
Sure.
Talk about zero trust strategy. Tie a bow on this conversation for us.
Generally, so we've always heard trust but verify. Zero trust kind of takes that a step further. Never trust, always verify. So a big piece of that, like Tom said, each department and each agency is different. So their approach to protecting their crown jewels and their important data is going to be different. But what spans across both, which is what Jack said, is like a programmatic approach to securing all your assets, getting all the visibility into the data that you need so that you can make intelligent decisions with the security team and tools that you've deployed.
Well, gentlemen, we're out of time, but I want to thank you for being here. Matt Ashton, Partner Engineer for Google Public Sector, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tom Littleton, Associate CIO at the Department of Transportation, making grants applications sexy. Great to have you, sir.
Thank you, George.
And his colleague, Jack Albright, Deputy CIO, Department of Transportation, thank you as well.
Thank you, George.
So, thanks to ATX Defense, Google Public Sector, and TD Synnex for making this program happen. And thank you, the audience, for tuning in. I hope you've learned from some of these wonderful public sector case studies and best practices for approaching IT infrastructure and security challenges. For GovExec TV, I'm George Jackson. Have a great day.